Today we're going to talk about dealing with disruptive behaviors. Most residents who have dementia will develop some form of disruptive behavior in the middle or later stages of their disease. Common symptoms such as wandering, rummaging, or hoarding can be very disruptive to the environment of your unit. Today we're going to talk about ways to assess these types of behaviors and then ways to effectively manage them in your facility.
Residents who suffer from dementia may exhibit disruptive behaviors like wandering, rummaging, or hoarding. When residents wander, they move or travel without a destination or purpose. 75% of demented residents wander. Wandering is most common in the middle stages of Alzheimer's disease. Wandering can be a dangerous behavior. If residents wander outside of their facility, they could die from exposure to heat or cold. They could fall and be seriously injured, or they could get hit by a car or even drown. Wandering is very dangerous, but it's also very easy to prevent with redirection. Another disruptive behavior common in residents with dementia is rummaging. When residents rummage, they search through other people's belongings by turning things over, mixing things up, or taking items. A resident may wander into another resident's room and rummage through drawers or closets. Residents may even go through your personal items in the employee break room or lounge area. Remember, residents' brains are damaged. Residents do not understand what they're doing. You can help prevent wandering by redirecting residents. The last disruptive behavior on which we'll focus today is hoarding. Hoarding residents collect objects for safekeeping or for future use. Hoarding behavior is common during the middle stages of Alzheimer's disease. Hoarding residents are not being mean or stealing. They're suffering from a disease that can make them confused about what belongs to them and what belongs to others. You can help prevent hoarding by redirecting residents.
Wandering behavior is controlled by two brain regions, your temporal lobe and your occipital lobe. Let's look at those brain regions. Here we see a model of a human head. Here we see the eyes right here. Here's the ear, and your temporal lobe is located right here, slightly on top of the ear. This part of the brain is involved with memory and orientation. Back here is the occipital lobe, which takes the visual information, which comes in through the eye right here, and interprets it, and tells you, for instance, that that's your room. Or if we look at this in the bigger model, right here, we see that your eye would sit right here, and the visual information would come back to the occipital lobe, where it would be recognized as, for instance, your room or your things in your room. On the other hand, you would remember where your room is located here in your temporal lobe. Let's see what happens in the brain of a person with Alzheimer's disease. Here we see a brain from a normal individual, and here we see a brain from a resident with Alzheimer's disease. First of all, let's look at the temporal lobe. This part of the brain is involved with memory and orientation. You can see that in the Alzheimer resident, that brain region is severely shrunken. It looks almost like a walnut. Here's the part of the brain that is involved with visual recognition. For instance, where your room is located, which clothing belongs to you. In the Alzheimer resident, over here, you can see that it's quite shrunken. So this individual, for instance, might forget where their room is located, or they might forget that that is not actually their dresser or their closet, and therefore they might go into that closet or that dresser. If we look at these brain regions cut in section, here, this is the brain region that's involved with memory, and here we see what it looks like in Alzheimer's residents. This individual, for instance, would forget where they are or where they're supposed to be going. The part of the brain that's involved with visual recognition is the occipital lobes down here. Here's the normal, here's the Alzheimer's. This shrunken brain from an Alzheimer resident would probably cause that individual to no longer recognize their room or recognize their belongings. Consequently, we can see that Alzheimer's disease damages the parts of the brain that are involved with remembering where your room is and recognizing your room and your clothing in your room.
There are many reasons why residents wander. Sometimes residents wander because they need something. They may be hungry or thirsty, or they may need to use the toilet. Even when residents wander in search of something, they usually don't know why they're wandering. They usually don't even know what it is that they need. Some residents wander because they believe that they need to fulfill some obligation from their past. An elderly gentleman may believe that he needs to milk his cows. An elderly lady may believe that she needs to feed her crying baby. Wandering residents may be trying to find something familiar, something that they recognize. Demented residents' brains are damaged, and they may have trouble recognizing familiar places, names, and people. Some residents wander because they're trying to get away from an unpleasant situation. They may be avoiding loud noises or other residents who have soiled themselves. Residents may wander because they have difficulty seeing or hearing. Sounds or sights may be misunderstood by residents, and the residents may become confused and wander. Some residents wander because their medications cause them to become confused or restless. Others wander because of an unrecognized illness. If you suspect that a resident is feeling sicker than usual, or if you think a resident is seeing or hearing things that aren't there, you should tell your nurse or supervisor immediately. Residents may just be wandering out of boredom. They might be looking for companionship, an opportunity to talk with another resident, or they may be seeking entertainment.
It's important so they won't get in, harm themselves or get into any place that could be dangerous. So you have to keep an eye on them and redirect.
Wandering can be very dangerous for residents, and some harmful responses to wandering can make the situation even worse. Never scold a wandering resident. Residents who wander may already be confused. Scolding residents will only frighten them. Never argue with a wandering resident. Disagreeing with residents will only upset them. Never threaten a wandering resident. Telling a resident, "We may just have to tie you down," or "I'm going to get the nurse to give you a shot," is an inappropriate response to wandering. Scaring residents will only make them more resistant. Never ignore a wandering resident. Wandering is very dangerous. Residents could be involved in an accident or fall and badly hurt themselves. Never give a resident medication to prevent wandering. Medication will not stop a resident from wandering. In fact, medication can make things worse by making residents sleepy, grumpy, or clumsy.
Sometimes you might have to let them kind of walk, probably bored or something, but try to make sure that they're in a safe place and not going somewhere where they can harm themselves. But you try to redirect them and have them to sit or come back to an activity, and sometimes their mind wanders off and they want to walk, but try to keep them safe.
You can help wandering residents by remembering the following helpful responses to wandering. Check to see if the wandering resident needs something. Simply asking the resident will not work. Offer the resident a drink or a snack. Take the resident to use the toilet. Check to see if the resident's environment is stressful. Is the unit noisy? Have employees or other residents been arguing? Are soiled residents nearby? Residents are less likely to wander if their environment is calm and pleasant. Take time to talk to the wandering resident. Sometimes residents are lonely and wander around looking for a friend. Your kindness and reassurance may be the only help they need. Find out if the resident is frightened. Sometimes residents with seeing or hearing problems become confused and frightened because they can't recognize their surroundings. These residents also need your kindness and reassurance. Residents may also be frightened because they're seeing or hearing things that aren't really there. If you think a resident may be imagining things, tell your nurse or supervisor immediately. Check to see if the wandering resident is in pain. Sometimes residents wander because they're in pain and don't know how to ask for help. If a wandering resident is in pain, tell your nurse or supervisor immediately. Keep residents active. Many residents wander out of boredom or restlessness. Spend time with residents. Play games. Listen to music. Exercise. Sing or dance. If a resident who has never wandered before starts wandering, or if a resident starts wandering more often than usual, tell your nurse or supervisor immediately. The resident may have an unrecognized illness or may be having a reaction to medications. Why is Mr. Nelson wandering into Mr. Jones's room? Why is Mr. Nelson going through Mr. Jones's clothing? Is he a thief? Is he dishonest? Is he being mean? No, no, no. Residents who rummage through other people's belongings don't understand what they're doing. Their brains are damaged. Some residents get confused about what belongs to them and what doesn't. Other residents believe that they're in a shopping mall, just picking up some items at the store. Rummaging can be very upsetting for residents or caregivers who find their belongings missing. Some harmful responses to rummaging can upset the rummaging resident and aggravate the situation, making it more difficult to return items to their rightful owners. Never accuse a resident of stealing or being bad. Residents' brains are damaged by disease. They don't understand what they're doing. Accusations will only upset them. Never argue with a rummaging resident. Disagreeing with residents will only make them more resistant.
No one at home. That's why we're here. That's why we're there to tell her that, she's not supposed to do that. And as long as she's not harming herself with it, we let her know that it's not hers and, who it belonged to. We talk to her and stuff like that. And I don't want to hurt her feelings.
You can help rummaging residents by remembering the following helpful responses to rummaging. Distract the resident. Use redirection to take the resident's mind off the shopping trip. Focus on another activity that the resident enjoys. Play a game, make a puzzle, or have a snack. Create a rummaging drawer, or an area where the resident can safely and harmlessly rummage through personal items. Ask the resident's family to help you fill a box with items from the resident's past, like old photographs, an apron, a hat, pen, papers, anything that the resident used at home or work.
You would get them out of the other residents' room or personal items and try to give them something to do. Maybe look through a magazine or some kind of things that they can do with their hands.
During the middle stages of dementia, residents are more likely to hoard things or collect items for safekeeping or for future use. Elderly residents with Alzheimer's disease may have lived through the Great Depression and World War II. They may remember having to save everything just to survive. Other residents may remind them of brothers or sisters who used to take their things. They are reminded of a time in the past when a prized possession was stolen. Sometimes residents need to hold on to things to feel safe and secure.
Sometimes we can't find an ink pen or pencil anywhere. We know where they are. And we'll let her know, we'll ask her sometime, can we borrow one of your ink pens? And she'll go in there and get us an ink pen and we'll write with it. And when we get ready for them, we know where they are. Most time we wait till she's distracted, watching TV or maybe in the dining room, then we'll go in and take the things out of her room that don't belong in there.
Like rummaging, hoarding can be very upsetting for residents or caregivers who find their belongings missing. Some harmful responses to hoarding can upset the hoarding resident and aggravate the situation, making it more difficult to return items to their rightful owners. Never accuse a resident of stealing or being bad. Accusations will only upset them. Never argue with a hoarding resident. It will only make the resident more resistant. Never demand that a resident return an item immediately. Making demands or speaking sharply to a resident will only frighten the resident. Never try to grab an item from a resident. You never want to get into a wrestling match with a resident. Someone could be badly hurt.
We can only try to talk to the resident and try to keep them from collecting things and just try to redirect and try to keep them from collecting it.
You can help hoarding residents by remembering the following helpful responses to hoarding. Find a resident's hoarding place and look for missing items there. Label all residents' personal items, including dentures, eyeglasses, toiletries, and clothing. This way, items can be easily returned to their rightful owners. Distract hoarding residents. Reassure residents. Guide them to another area where they can relax, listen to music, or have something to drink. Then retrieve any missing items discreetly. You wake up from a nap one afternoon and discover you've lost your wedding ring. You search all over the house for it. You go into every room and look on the floor and in all the drawers. You don't know when you lost it, so it could be anywhere. Finally, you find it in an old drawer. You feel so relieved and so much better. Suddenly, a stranger comes into the room and tries to take the ring away from you. She keeps telling you it belongs to someone else, but you know it's your wedding ring, and it took you so long to find it. How would you react to the woman trying to take away your ring? How would you feel? What would make you feel better? Please stop the tape and discuss ways you can help residents deal with this type of problem. When residents wander, rummage, or hoard, they're not trying to be difficult or dishonest. They're just confused about where they are and what they're doing because their brains are damaged.
Mrs. Adams is a demented resident in your facility. You often find her checking the doors and trying to sneak out. One afternoon, you find her in the parking lot. You approach her and she tells you that she needs to go home to check on her baby. What can you do to help Mrs. Adams?
Tell her that her children don't need her.
Ask her children to send pictures of themselves.
Watch Mrs. Adams very carefully in the future. She'll probably try to sneak out again.
Scold her.
Mr. Baltz has Alzheimer's disease. He lived on a farm with his wife until she died last month. His wife allowed him to wander around the farm and work in the garden. He was very happy as a farmer. Now he roams around the facility and frequently tries to sneak out. Why is Mr. Baltz trying to leave?
He was always very physically active.
He believes his garden needs water.
He wants to return to his farm.
All of the above.
What can you do to help Mr. Baltz?
Increase his physical activity.
Distract Mr. Baltz with games.
Watch Mr. Baltz very carefully.
All of the above.
Ms. Rubin suffers from Alzheimer's disease. She strolls around the facility and often wanders into other residents' rooms. She is a very pleasant, sociable woman, but she has a lot of difficulty communicating. What can you do to help Ms. Rubin?
Get her involved in more structured activities.
Tell the doctor she needs more medicine.
Scold Miss Rubin.
Ask another resident to watch her.
Ms. Donahue has dementia. She often wanders into other residents' rooms and takes their belongings. The other residents and their families are very upset about finding things missing. Ms. Donahue was always a very kind and honest person. What can you do to help her?
Call the police. Miss Donahue is a thief.
Increase Miss Donahue's activities.
Ask her pastor to pray with her.
Tell her family that she must leave.